Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to Worth It Then, Worth It Now, an ongoing segment I run here on this channel where I look at games of yesteryear, specifically 10 plus years removed, and where possible, I line them up with a sale. Today's no exception. Today we're looking at Mirror's Edge. Apparently released on Steam in January of 2009. I remember playing it on, Xbox 360 at the tail end of 2008. This came out originally in November 2008, and it was a month behind Dead Space 1, the other EA big title at the time, which came out in October of 2008. And I point to this as probably the golden age of EA games. Don't get me wrong, they still have some good hits these days, but their hit rate is a little bit more hit and miss. I think most will agree. And EA for the longest time have been an example of how the games industry has moved from a little bit more Wild West, by gamers, for gamers, where risk and risk management wasn't really a concept or something super at the forefront of these companies. Whereas now you jump forward now, and I'm actually a bit sympathetic, to be honest, because I recognize the games industry is probably the largest money-making entertainment industry on the planet, much bigger than movies these days, like multi-billions of dollars in this industry. And EA is one of the blue chip investment companies. I can't really fault them for taking zero risk and just trying to push their portfolio up a couple of percentage points a year. The downstream effect for you and me, though, is that, we get less interesting games and more safe FIFAs and F1s and Maddens, that sort of thing. Anyway, just some thoughts. It's easy to hang them out to dry and just say EA bad, but also the industry's gone in an interesting way. But like I said, if you look at it more through a historian lens and where the industry's gone and the inevitable outcome, I find that a little bit more interesting. But regardless, there's no denying that when these two games came out, they rocked my world. And going back to this was a delight, honestly. It feels like Scarlett's Little Secret, a game that flew under so many people's radars, which is tragic because it was so original. It's so beautiful. Even all these years later, it looks so good. You talk about all these new technologies for creating procedural terrain and making realistic looking environments. Now look, I'm not going to try and pretend that this is ultra realistic. Obviously, there's a cyberpunk stylized art style with very blown out bloom and super high contrast colors, and I think it all works really well together. But when you impose that against the pedestrian white concrete that seems to fill everything in between these splashes of color, it kind of creates a hyper-realism because of that contrast. And it certainly doesn't hurt that most of the way you interact with the environment is running a million miles an hour. It's almost like the backgrounds in a racing game. It's not like you stop to have a look at them, which allows room for your own mind's eye to interpolate and fill in the gaps. The last bastion of imagination, right? But yeah, I was just wildly impressed by how good it looks. Like, there's nostalgia in me, obviously, and I'm going to remember things a certain way, but it's always a pleasant surprise when one of these old games actually really holds up to the mental image that you've created of it. Obviously, I'm gushing, but yeah, I think this game still looks beautiful today. And it's no surprise because it's made by DICE, EA's go-to pretty internal studio. You can sort of see where they started, see the early DNA and how you end up with games like, Battlefront 2, Star Wars Battlefront 2, the new one. I don't think I even played it or played much of it, but everything you ever saw of it's like the prettiest game ever. But, beauty and graphics don't make the game on its own. How does Mirror's Edge hold up? I think it holds up exceptionally well for what it was, a trailblazing, experimental parkour type game. It was kind of parkour before parkour was a fad. There was a time after it. Who knows, this may have contributed to kicking off the idea, but this was really, from a normie perspective, normie Scarlett, this was also original, and they play it so straight as well. So you've got this cyberpunk future, everything's clean, everything's bright, no one acknowledges it. You're a runner, so you sort of sit outside the law, treated as almost like a criminal of the highest order, and you deliver packages for whoever. And I think you just delivered the wrong package the wrong time, and it kicks off an investigation and a murder trail, a bit of a whodunit. Your sister's framed, she's a police officer. officer. So, some pretty basic primal elements of you and your sibling being on opposite sides of the law. It's actually not a bad story. It is just backdrop to keep you going from point A to point B. But when you mix that in with things like the pace being pretty relentless, other than downtime cutscenes, and they've got these interesting animated cutscenes, I think some people won't necessarily like the style. I like it just because it's a different style. But I think to myself, if they released this cartoon anime type style in modern day right now, people would probably laugh at it. But that may be more commentary on the state of gamers and whether they're open-minded or not. But I personally like it, if only because it's different. But yeah, you mix in that sort of high adrenaline pumping soundtrack. They had the whole theme song, Still Alive, was a big deal, and they made a real show of it on all the GameSpot websites, and it was treated as like a new release single music clip. And just the whole theme and the fact that you're speeding through at 100 miles an hour, I think the story complements the relentless pace, if that makes sense, where the only time you get for a little bit of breathing room is these really short cutscenes cutting the levels together, and it's all who done it, who can I trust, where do I go next, a bit gumshoe. Doesn't outstay its welcome, and yeah, to reiterate, I think it's complementary. The way you parkour around, I mean, it was built for thumbsticks. I was playing it with mouse and keyboard this time around, and it works perfectly fine, that's for sure. But the interfacing with the environment is pretty basic. You move into things, you press, space bar or shift to high state, low state, depends how you want to see it, but that's kind of it. Jump and duck slide. The controls on thumbsticks, I believe you use the bumpers and the triggers for, your parkouring. Jump and crouch on the bumpers, unbelievable, but it worked really well. And there's a sort of momentum component to the way you move through the world. It's not necessarily that you're sluggish, but even playing it now, it makes me think of the phase these days, more last year, of indie body cam footages and all that. It's trying to go for a kind of realism layer that you don't normally see in the movement space of a first-person game. So deliberate is probably the best term. Sluggish might be what someone else would call, but it's tight enough. But moving through these environments and being shot at and chased by helicopters, and it actually gives you a real appreciation for clever environmental design in what is trying to convince you to be a real cyberpunk city. That is arguably the true character of this game, is the world environment that you move through. Kicking off on middle of the day bright skyscrapers, but then the next level it's sort of a bit more overcast. The lighting model changes a little bit more into the grey, and it's noticeable and it's cool. Then when you do go inside buildings of different corporations and towers, offices, they will have their own lighting theme, whether it's lime green or sort of a brilliant yellow. And it's just really stylized, but again, there's a marrying. I'm not trying to tell you it's up to perfect building code or modern design philosophy of how you would paint the inside of a building, right? But as far as contributing to the immersive flow state of the environments that you move through, the way that they do the color combinations is actually brilliant. Like just ducking back into the early game for B-roll today, running through those buildings, there's a point going through a plaza and that goes into soft blues, but then you're moving past storefronts and roller doors and all that, and it's so much work for what is ultimately a tiny slice of the world that the player's only going to spend 15 seconds in, right, before they jump over into the next building. But it does the job. It tricks your brain into thinking, I am running through one tiny fraction, 1,000th of this entire giant beautiful world, and that's what makes you want to play. Like, my nostalgia is strong for the early levels because I've revisited this over the years, but part of me is like really driven to keep going, if only to see the other levels, because it's been so long I don't quite remember them. I know big finales fighting police, I remember that, but these environs are so striking, I want to see more. I've moved through this like piped sewer system as well, and that's got all these soft greens and big open areas, climbing up and down ladders and tubes, and oh my goodness, it's really good. So yeah, the real character of the game is the city, and I'm not suggesting they created it this way, but consider you wanted to showcase a brilliant cyberpunk vision of like a Technicolor environ, right? How would you actually design a game to showcase said environment? Now, this is probably a terrible way to design a game. I've talked about the cart following the horse, etc., but this is just floating it out there. And the idea of moving through it as a running person at absolute top speed and navigating all these different environs would be the perfect answer for trying to showcase said environs and said environmental design. Now, if you did design a game that way back to front, it would probably be terrible. We've talked about this. You see a lot of modern game companies think about messaging first and gameplay second. But I'm just using this to illustrate, again, and I'm going circular, so we'll wrap it up, that I feel the real true character in this game is the city, and the way that you interface with it just makes it even stronger. Anyway, Mirror's Edge, it's like $10. You should get it. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and it still holds up outrageously well. Oh, if you made it this far and you're curious, there's an internal physics, physics setting that was causing me some massive tearing, and I've disabled that, and that made things much better. Presumably it's like an outdated build and it's not just compatible with modern anything, so turning that off made my life much better. All right, that's enough, team. We'll just leave it there and I'll catch you on the next one.